Sexton trying to get loose. He'll fire. Hey! Knocks it down. Okoro slammed it home. Garland upstairs. Oh! Sexton inside. A thunderous dunk. And Allen blocked the shot at the rim.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. And connecting with me now live via Zoom is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. A bummer loss to the Philadelphia 76ers. One of those just... You know, the ones that make you feel insecure about the stuff you were already insecure about. I think, you know, I don't know about you, and maybe this is jumping into the discussion a little too fast, but I find that when the Cavs lose games like that, I actually feel much worse about them than I feel good when they win them. Because it's like all those insecurities of like, oh man, I just don't know how this offense is going to hold up in a postseason setting. Like all those anxieties kind of pop out in a loss where Philly just kind of ground this offense into the dirt, much like the Cavs have been doing to other teams as of late.
I think that is a natural feeling to have, especially because we've been on the other side of this dynamic.
Natural right and now, not that logical, by the way, because like they're still missing one of their best offensive players.
Well, true. But what I'm saying is we've been on the other side of that dynamic where, okay, we can talk about matchup stuff and whatnot, but at the end of the day, like Joel Embiid is the MVP. Like if the season was called at this point, he would be the MVP. And we've seen the PJ Tucker, LeBron stopper memes. And right now, the Cavs in a lot of ways are on the other end of that discussion, right? Like where it doesn't really matter because Joel Embiid is really that good and he can single-handedly win you a game or two in a playoff series or maybe an entire series on his own. When we had Channing Frye on the podcast, like you said, there's going to be games where your stars have to win, where your bench comes out and wins, and that's the way that a playoff series can go. And Joel Embiid put together one of his best performances of the season against the Cavs. And I think the right place to start here is by giving a tip of the cap because he played out of his mind. And yes, the Cavs did a better job as the game progressed. You could tell he was getting a little tired defending the Cavs pick and roll action, which he did at an incredibly high level. But, you know, like that's going to be an little ebb and flow battle throughout the season series. And if there is a playoff series against this team, that's going to be one of the major storylines.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the book on Jared Allen is, hey, he's actually a much better team defender than a post defender, and I think he's gotten stronger and much better in those spots, but oof, I mean, it's the best post scorer in the NBA, him or Jokic, and, you know.
And even then, we've seen Allen do a very good job against Giannis this year. We've seen him do a good job against Jokic this year. And Embiid is just a different animal. And when he goes 4 for 5 from 3, that makes things a little bit more difficult. And there's other things that we can point to. I think the soft doubling that the Cavs did early in this game really kind of came back to bite them. I was happy to see that adjustment was made in game. And from the second quarter on, they were a little bit, they picked their spots better on when they would do the double team and do it with a little more force. Obviously, if you have Thibault on the strong side or any situation like that, that might be your opportunity to force Embiid into a mistake. But, you know, like those are going to be the type of adjustments as we face the Sixers 3 more times this season that will be really interesting to monitor because as good as Embiid is, I almost feel like you do have to apply the LeBron strategy that other teams try to do against us, which is try to defend him straight up. I thought the zone was a nice little wrinkle as well. I think that Mobley at the top kind of 3-2 zone could be something that works, but you're going to have to defend Embiid pretty honestly because he's such a good passer that he is going to make you pay anytime that you don't double with force.
Yeah, he's gotten a lot better as a playmaker, man. He used to be one of those, 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio kind of guys, and he has gotten much better at kind of And I think we always underrate this. Just he's seen more defenses thrown at him over the course of his career than anyone on the Cavs thus far. And I think he's really developed a lot as a playmaker and as a creator. Oftentimes, he's been the best passer on the floor for Philly this season. Given that Ben wasn't playing, and obviously Harden will supplant him there, no matter how little you like him, Justin. But yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know. I don't mind hard doubles every now and again. One thing that's nice about the Cavs is that their arms are so freaking long that when they do force you into passes, they can kind of get deflections and jumpstart their offense. We saw that a few times. We've seen that in the past when they hard doubled Giannis. They made Giannis kind of see ghosts a few times by kind of coming at him with intermittent different looks over the course of the game. So I'm not all the way on team. Just let Embiid cook you, especially given that it's just going to put Jarrett in foul trouble.
Right.
And he got 15 free throws in this game. And while there is a lot of complaints about grifting with him, and they're definitely there. It's
I mean, he flew sideways. Like something out of a cartoon, fighting for a loose ball with Darius Garland. And like Garland's gotten a little bit stronger and whatnot, but I don't believe that he is capable of doing that to Embiid. And once you add James Harden to that mix, some of those games are going to go 4 hours long, and they will be very, very difficult to watch. But he also does draw a lot of legitimate contact as well, right? Like he is such a force on the interior, and he really he doesn't let you off the hook very often, right? Like he's not going to settle for jumpers the way that he used to earlier in his career. He's a really, really forceful player, and as I said, he would easily be my pick for MVP at this point of the season.
Yeah, I mean, he just out talented the Cavs in this one, and on both ends. I mean, defensively, his drop coverage was really messing with this team. This team is a team that typically loves drop coverage. They don't mind it at all because Darius is such a good floater artist. And when those dropping bigs do have to step up to take away that floater, that they typically have a big who can cut in the dunker spot for either an alley-oop or a nice layup finish. And for the most part, I thought Embiid did a really nice job playing in those 1-on-2s. Or 2-on-1s where he kind of snuffed a lot of stuff out. In transition, he just bottled up Jetty a few times. A lot of Jetty complaints on the timeline, and in our Discord after that game, I'm like, man, I don't know what you want from him. He's one of the only dudes who was getting shots up at least.
And we've also seen throughout the season that Jetty is a different player when the Cavs have a backup point guard. And Rajon Rondo was rested for maintenance against Philadelphia, with both him and Garland coming back from injuries. I think it would be a little unnecessary / reckless to play them 3 games in 4 nights. And I thought this was
played
going
like
to be
30 minutes in that Pacers game too. I would have given Goodwin some minutes. Just to get another ball handler out there.
Yeah, I could certainly see the argument for that. I would be a little bit concerned when you just kind of look at the way that Thibault was playing defensively and the way that he was getting into passing lanes and some of that. Like I think Goodwin can be prone to the odd lazy pass or two, and those were pick sixes basically every single time you threw one of those. Like I came into this game really expecting it to be a sloppy performance because both teams were playing their 3rd game in 4 nights. The one thing I didn't take into consideration was Philly was playing in Philly for all 3 of those games. And the reason I bring this up, and I'm sure some people roll their eyes as excuse making and whatnot, is there is a consistent trend throughout this season that when the Cavs kind of have these tired leg performances, it's usually 3rd game in 4 nights in 3 cities, right? Like it's been something that's come up many times. We saw it with the Milwaukee game where they didn't have Jared Allen and Darius just couldn't get around Drew Holiday and whatnot. And we saw the next game when it was a different rest situation that the Cavs performed better, right? And this is part of what happens in an 82-game season. Now, the flip side of that coin is the Cavs also did this to themselves, because when you're playing in these situations where you do have to travel to 3 different cities in 4 nights to play games, and you come out a little not sharp against Indiana. You put yourself in your biggest hole this season and you have to fight to come back. That's different than Philadelphia that took care of business against an OKC team without Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The Cavs used a lot of energy to come back against Indiana because they didn't start the game as sharp as they could have. They didn't give the They didn't play Garland as well. That's a huge part. But, like when you don't come out with that sort of forcefulness and you don't take care of business in those games, you make things more difficult for yourself. And when you have Kevin Love airballing open 3-pointers, like he's got heavy legs. Jetty's not as effective. Rondo wasn't able to play, right? Like this is the type of stuff that the Cavs have to learn, that like the difference between a 50-win team and a 60-win team is understanding these type of situations. And when you have the front end of a back-to-back against a lesser team, you come out really sharp because you want to be resting in the fourth quarter, and the Cavs just didn't do that. No, you're right. You're right. It was, it was just one of those situations where they did have to really burn a lot of energy capital to beat the Pacers, and that's a team that you really want to stomp on the front end of a back-to-back. I saw some folks on our Discord saying, hey, if you're going to rest Darius, why don't you just rest him on the tougher game, just take the easier dub against the Pacers. And, I think that was kind of proven wrong just because they were able to win against Indy without Garland. But, we did see the price they paid for it. Ultimately, though, I do think it's a hard matchup for this team. This is a team that doesn't... Embiid is an amazing post scorer. They have one dude who really can be asked to guard him, even kind of, in Jared Allen, because Evan is not strong enough, and they don't have a Dwight Howard or one of these big burly backup fives that can just eat post ups, and use 6 fouls at least. A guy like Hartenstein last year, who is by no means a defensive wizard, but just a big dude. So it's a tough matchup there. It's a tough matchup on a night when their jumpers aren't going, because this is a team that has to pass their way to buckets, especially when the outside is not going. They have one of the higher assist rates in the league, and as a result, one of the higher turnover rates in the league. A dude like Matisse Thybulle will get 6 steals, even B-ball Paul Reed had three steals. Embiid had 3 steals. They were able to get into the passing lanes and disrupt things, especially because Embiid allows you, being such an elite drop defender, allows you to stay in your defensive shell. So it's a tough matchup, even if the Cavs are right. But they clearly weren't all the way at their best in this game, between Lowry being out and just some heavy legs in a lot of key spots. Yeah, and some of it also just comes down to execution, right? Like some nights you're going to play better than others, and I don't think that the Cavs necessarily came out with their best foot forward. I came into this podcast, full disclosure, ready to talk about Okoro and Dean Wade together, because for the season, that pairing has not been very effective. They're both very good defensive players. I actually thought Dean Wade really played great defense against Philadelphia and deserves a lot of credit for it. He had a very good game overall, but when you come against some of these better defensive teams, you've seen that the Cavs, when they don't have Lowry out there, it's a lot more difficult for them to generate offense. And I had tweeted early in the game that I felt this was a game that they would need more Levert and Garland versus Okoro and Garland, because you needed the multiple ball handlers out there, especially when Philly has Thybulle and Danny Green with Joel Embiid behind them. Like that's a very kind of good defensive trio that's well suited to deal with what the Cavs have going on. But and it's also, for the game at least, it's also, by the way, a lineup where you can afford to have a Lowry out there. There's a lot of non off the dribble threats. Yeah, and I was going to say, I was ready to talk about how Wade and Okoro don't work together. I still think this holds true, but I do have to give kind of credit to that pairing in this game, because the Cavs starting lineup had a plus 27.7 net rating in 11 minutes together against Philadelphia, and the offensive rating was 119. But for the season, like I said, Wade and Okoro together, it's only a 102.0 rating and a plus 1.2 net rating. And I just think that when you have Allen, Mobley out there, you need a little bit more creation. Hopefully Lowry will be coming back. He's been upgraded. His status has been upgraded to day-to-day. And just earlier today, Carter, I don't know if you saw this. He tweeted out the hourglass emoji on Instagram. Or
Oh,
not
wow.
tweeted out, but he posted the hourglass emoji in an Instagram post of him at practice. So we might be getting closer to seeing Lauri Markkanen join the rest of the roster with the Cavs.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see. And, part of me just hopes he just waits till after the All-Star break. We got one game left, which crazy, man. They've got one game in the next 11 days. And
that's going to be needed because you could tell like they're definitely tired. Like Mobley has hit the rookie wall to some extent. I thought the Indy game was one of his best games defensively, but you could tell he's lost a little bit of juice on offense. Jared Allen was definitely a step slow against Embiid. Like obviously that's going to be a tough matchup. That's not going to be a matchup that the Cavs are going to win in these head-to-head games. But you could tell like even in space he seemed a step slow. He wasn't as explosive. Some of the alley-oops were very well defended. Others, he just wasn't really getting up there in the same ways that he has in the past. But this is why the All-Star break is here, and this is a really good opportunity for the Cavs to get some rest and get right for the stretch run.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. To the Wade Okoro pairing, I really do think in a lot of ways it just shows the difference in perception. Dean Wade's been a better 3-point shooter than Lauri Markkanen this season, but the way he's defended still doesn't represent that. And sometimes the way you're defended matters much more than the reality in terms of opening up space for everyone else. So yeah, it was just a tough game, man. It was a tough, gritty game. And, I'm glad that the Cavs did kind of get, they took a lead in the mid-third quarter. And they did fight back. It wasn't just like there were times where they were making the Sixers sweat, and the Sixers answered. With great shot making, not just from Embiid, but my goodness, Tyrese Maxey hit every big jumper.
They were 10 of 22 from three, and it felt better than that. Like the threes kind of came in bunches all night for the Sixers, and you got to give a lot of credit to their shot making. And Cavs, as you said, they took a lead, but then when you had Garland on the bench, all of a sudden that lead evaporated and ballooned to 11-point lead for the Sixers, and that was basically the story of the game. And we've seen like in playoff series in the past, like that can happen. Like you will have nights where the shots aren't falling for you; they fall for your opponent. One or two of those Embiid threes don't go down, and it's a different game. So I'm going to be really interested, though. I'm not backing off any of my Cavs Sixers takes from the last podcast yet. I'm not doing that based on this game. I'm really interested to see what the next couple matchups between these teams look like, because it's going to be different. Like when you have James Harden starting out there instead of Danny Green, we would assume, along with Tyrese Maxey and Thibault, that's different defensively. Like all of a sudden now you have three weak defenders out there. The Cavs are going to probably have a different look as well with Lauri Markkanen out there for spacing. We've seen what a difference that makes for the offense all year. At that point, maybe Karis Levert will be starting. But honestly, with Lauri out there, if he's back in the lineup, as much as I personally think Levert should be starting, and I think that playmaking is helpful, you can get away with Okoro starting at shooting guard when Lauri's out there. It's been a very, very potent offensive lineup all season. I believe it has a 110 net rating. They're starting five with Garland, Okoro, Lowry, Mobley, and Allen. So JB Bickerstaff is going to have more options. We're probably going to have a backup point guard in Rajon Rondo, and styles make fights. I'm really, really interested to see what the next three games between these teams look like.
Yeah, it's funny. Our dear friend over at the retired Real Cavs fans, Ben, tweeted that he kind of feels like the team should just be starting their best five. And with the knowing Ben, I know what that implication is. It was just get Okoro, off the floor and put Levert in there in that starting two spot. And I do think I don't expect I don't really expect JB to do that. I think he's going to roll with the starting lineup through the end of the year at this point, unless those numbers start to change. Because we know JB pays attention to that kind of stuff. The analytics team on this squad is very smart, and if that 5-man unit stops working, then maybe he'll consider some changes. I do think that depending on the matchup, like we've seen this a billion times now, playoffs are a different game, and and continuity doesn't matter as much in terms of like facing the realities of certain matchups. So I think there's a very real world that if they do play a team that has a couple great defenders on the floor, that, you know, JB might opt to start Karis LeVert for a couple games, you know, in a postseason setting. But at this point, I do think that lineup is going to stay around because, again, there's just too much evidence that it worked pretty darn well against most teams.
I will say this. I don't know if I would make adjustments like that. Like, I think the Cavs
coaches do it all the time, Justin.
I get that, but at the same time, I feel like the Cavs need to stick with what their identity is, because when you make those adjustments on the fly, like even when it comes to the doubles against Philly, like I felt the Cavs got away from what their defensive identity was, and they were left scrambling. Like,
wait, what do you mean? They mix up their coverages all the time. I don't agree with that.
No, I'm talking about lineup changes. Like if you start Okoro all season and all of a sudden you go into the playoffs, and because an opposing team has two good perimeter defenders, all of a sudden you put Levert in. I just don't like that kind of decision making. I would stick to what's got you there, and then maybe later in the series you make an adjustment. Okay, I thought you were saying going into a series, you look at what the opponent has and you change your lineup.
You would make an adjustment like that. I think that would be one of the first cards JB plays. If we do get to the playoffs and our concerns about the offense against elite defenses are holding, then you go, okay, well, let's see what we look like with Levert out there. But I don't think that's where they'll start. I think ultimately JB's going to stick with what's worked for the rest of the season unless that changes.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how Philly changes, because obviously Harden coming in, despite my reservations with him, that's going to change the offense a lot. Like that's going to really give them some juice on that end of the floor. But there is going to be a defensive change. Like when it's no longer Thibault and Danny Green, and you have Maxey and Harden out there as the two perimeter defenders, like that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for the Cavs. I'm going to be interested to see who they put on Lowry. Right, like if all of a sudden you get Lowry cutting to the basket and James Harden is the one defending him, like what's that going to look like? So I'm really interested to see how this matchup goes.
And by the way, our dear friend Ben,
I can see you smirking. What are you going to say?
Our dear friend Ben just is clearly watching live and just DM'd me and said I meant Levert over Wade. So
I was going to say, I'm glad that he brought that up, because I was going to say in the Atlanta game, if we're assuming that Lowry's going to come back after the All-Star break and not play against Atlanta, I probably would have played Levert and Okoro together. Like I think that
I don't mind that definitely get at all.
You can definitely get away with that. I mean, Levert's 6'7", Okoro 6'5", and you've got the Tower City behind them. Like I really think that can work, and just that ball handling I think matters so much. And there's still a few times where Levert gets a little too deep under the basket. I thought he actually did a better job trying to draw contact. The refs clearly weren't allowing that, and that probably worked in the Cavs' favor because they were starting to get a little more physical with Embiid. And as much as he gets calls through grifting, there were other times where the Cavs are putting a body into him, going straight up, but being physical. And that's going to need to be allowed for them to have any chance against Philadelphia, because if they are calling a game where contact isn't being allowed, that he basically becomes impossible to defend.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly fair. And I thought Levert was not his best game. I mean, this is kind of you would argue probably the worst one he's had as a Cav yet. Just couldn't really get a lot going. And I just don't know if I like the de facto backup point guard thing. I think a lot of people have expected that to be the way this would go. Hey, we're not really going to count on Rondo as our backup point guard. We'll just let Levert do it. Especially as rotation shortened, and I just missed Rondo out there. I just think there's a difference between being able to make out of the pick and roll, kind of make the reads that are there, versus Rondo, who can kind of move the chess pieces around a little bit better. I really don't mind that pairing on bench units anyway, even though the shooting is a little deficient.
Yeah, like I think it opens up though, because if you're assuming that those two are playing together as the backcourt with the second unit, it's probably going to be with Jetty Osman and Kevin Love, who both of them already have pretty good chemistry. Like Levert has had some kick out passes to Love that have been really nice. Rondo obviously has very good chemistry with Kevin Love, and Jetty Osman's always willing to shoot. And you're probably having Evan Mobley as the backup center in those situations. So I agree with you. I think there might be times where Levert can work as a de facto backup point guard, but I do think it's nice that JB Bickerstaff does have Rajon Rondo that he can call on, or even Brandon Goodwin if you need a little more scoring punch. Like I think that there's valid options there, and it still remains to be seen whether or not the Cavs are going to be active on the buyout market. Obviously, that's a little bit tricky because buyout players they'll go to contenders most of the time, or situations where
markets.
Right. Like there's so many factors that go into the buyout market. So we'll see what happens there. But if they don't go that route, I do think as the team gets healthier, that a lot of these issues aren't going to be as magnified because they're going to have two backup point guard options. Lowry opens up so much for them offensively, like really has made a big difference offensively. Even when the shot's not falling, the gravity that he has, just the space it creates for Mobley and Allen to work, and Garland in particular. And every now and then, like he'll beat someone off the dribble and have a random Tom Chambers like dunk over somebody, right? Like he applies pressure on the defense in different ways than Dean Wade. And I think even having Dean Wade with the second unit as an option to provide that defense, to provide the activity that he brings to the table. Like when I talk about Okoro and Dean Wade together, it's not like to rip and either of them. Like both of them clearly belong in the rotation. Both of them have been really positive contributors this season. It's just about, finding the lineups that work best and analyzing this from a fit perspective.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, ultimately, I do think one of the reasons JB does play guys like Wade and Lowry at the 3 and kind of insists on it is it doesn't make his life a little bit easier on the rotation or on the perimeter. Like that is the one thing about going with the Okoro Levert starting lineups. Okay, all your wings, 2 of your 3 wings on the team are now starting, and the nice thing about Wade at the 3 means you kind of can just play Mobley as the backup 5 and Love as the backup 4, and it all just kind of clicks in way easier. Like you don't have to like do that crazy Jenga from a rotation perspective. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I hope
we also probably have the worst. Like, let's be honest, we probably have the worst wing rotation out of a lot of the playoff teams. Like, there's just not a lot of depth
Clippers,
at the small
man.
forward position. Yeah, they are only wings, and same with Toronto. But I mean, the flip side of that, of course, is that Lowry has played really well at small forward, and those lineups have been effective. So
I'll actually say this: he hasn't played that well at small forward, and it still works really well, which is exciting because when he does play well, it's really good.
That's a really good correction. Thank you for that, Carter. I do have to, and I'm sorry that I didn't bring this up at the start of the podcast, but we had 2 streaks end for the Cavs, Carter, with that Philly game. Do you know what they were?
No, tell me.
First streak, the 4-game winning streak. That's the obvious one.
Sure.
Second streak, you can no longer use your nice little fact about the Cavs not having a 20-point per game player. Darius is up to 20.1.
Look at our young All-Star King.
Our 20.1 point per game All-Star King. Like I obviously, and
he was great,
was
by the way.
Clear.
We didn't talk about him.
He was
much.
fantastic.
He was elite in that game.
Yeah, the way that he was able to get wherever he wanted to on the court, and I thought early in the game when they subbed in Levert, Doc Rivers quickly put Thibault onto Karis Levert rather than Darius Garland. Garland got a couple of jumpers. They switched Thibault onto Garland, and Garland continued to cook. Like what he did against Thibault was really impressive. He also faced Danny Green. Then they put Tobias Harris on him for a little bit more length. Like especially in a game where there wasn't a lot of spacing, where the Cavs were shooting 1 for 8 off of Garland passes, and they were taking away a lot of kind of his bread and butter passing lanes. For him to recognize when the defense is taking away those passing lanes and capitalizing on it, especially against really good defenders. Like, that is the next step for his growth, because as teams adjust to him scoring like that and being that offensive force, those passing lanes are going to open back up, right? Like, that is the type of playoff-like adjustments that Garland is going to need to familiarize himself with and capitalize on if the Cavs are going to be successful and have a little bit of a postseason run.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. It was a good learning experience game. I mean, I think that JB mentioned as much. By the way, completely random aside, was Doc Rivers serious when he said he named his son after Austin Carr pregame?
We have talked about this on the podcast.
Have we?
Yes, because this came back up again last year.
This goes to show I don't listen to you.
Yes, he named Austin Rivers after Austin Carr.
Wow, two gunners. Respect.
Yeah. No, a legend, friend of the podcast, Austin Carr. I agree. Go Cavs. I love AC, man. I just love the energy.
Man. He's the best.
And not just because he came on the podcast, but
no, we loved him before that.
Speaking of Gunners, Carter, Karis Levert was absolutely phenomenal against Indiana. And you pointed this out on Twitter, and I thought it was a really smart point. But when Levert was asked about kind of the game, when he was interviewed after the game, he mentioned how anytime he has a miscue, there is that pressure from the Cavs to, okay, on defense, this is what you should be doing. That there is the accountability that the Cavs culture is rubbing off on him. And I've actually thought that in his 3 games with the Cavs, like, we now have 2 games where he didn't shoot the ball particularly well. We have 1 game where he basically won it with his shooting in the fourth quarter, paired with phenomenal defense from Evan Mobley. But I think his defense has actually been pretty good, and he's been using his length in a lot of interesting ways, getting into passing lanes, getting steals, getting blocks. Like, I've been really, really impressed with his effort on that end, because it's been a focus issue for him throughout his career. It's not like he doesn't have the tools to be an impactful defender.
I think he's been about as advertised defensively. I don't know if I've been like wildly impressed. He's definitely gotten into passing lanes, averaging 2 steals a game. He's got 6 in his 3 games with the Cavs. I just see the footwork problems with him. Like he just, I
might be falling in love with the stocks a little bit, just because kind of like those high variance plays are there, and
those are hugely important, present. And especially like given that like our best perimeter defender, Isaac Okoro, does not get a lot of steals or blocks. Like, that's not the way his bread is buttered. So, I get that. I just see the balance, the weak closeouts.
Those issues are definitely there. There's no denying that.
I don't think he's been bad defensively. I just don't know if he's been good defensively. But to your point, I do like that he is already like if there's anything that speaks to the kind of the cultures, that kind of unprompted he said that post game in Indy, where he's like, man, like, I had a couple miscues and I see that no one else is having them, and I got to be better. Like, it's already kind of that implicit cultural pressure, not a negative pressure, by the way, where like people are screaming at him every time he messes up, but like just the damn, everyone else is really staying focused with how they pride themselves on the defensive end of the floor. Even Darius in his podcast with Draymond was clearly very, very proud of the way this team plays defense. And that was never his game, and never
even though he has said he said before the season he enjoys playing defense more than offense, which for someone that is as exciting, I'm going to call BS on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's nice, Darius. I'm not sure if I buy that.
I appreciate the defensive effort he's putting in, and I think that is the right thing to say. But at the same time, like, he is one of the most exciting offensive players in the league.
Come on, bro. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it was a good indicator, like, of account. Like, there's accountability when people are holding you accountable. When you're being challenged after a loss. And people, like, here's an example, and like, this is not to underscore it at all, but it's easier to be accountable when like people are asking you to be accountable. The Cavs lose to the Warriors, and Jared Allen goes really hard on himself about his defensive rebounding, and it was very clear that that the failures on that side of the ball were really impacting them in the game. This is after a win. And when you're accountable, when no one is asking you to be, like no one was like, Karras, talk about your defensive lapses in the third quarter. I just think it's a good sign for the kind of player that the Cavs have picked up here. And obviously talk is cheap, and we'll see if he can like really have his first positively impactful defensive season of his career, because that really just has not been his game. But like I think that those kind of quotes are a really good indicator of that moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. And I think overall, like it does seem like he's fitting in really well on the court. Like even the play where he made the extra pass to Jetty Osman for 3, like he is doing the things that you would hope for somebody that has come into a new situation and is trying to fit in rather than be the guy, right? Or go out and play hero ball. Like there are still going to be times where he takes those type of shots, and frankly, the Cavs need someone to go out there and take those kind of shots and put pressure on defenses. And whether it is the starting lineup or whether it just occurs throughout the flow of the game, I am really excited to see Garland, Levert, Lowry, Mobley, and Allen, because when you're talking about 4 guys with a 6'10 plus wingspan around Garland, 2 guys that are very good at handling the ball and running the pick and roll, and the spacing of Lowry, like to me that is just such an exciting lineup, and I think it opens up a lot of possibilities. And I definitely want to see that group get some run together before the postseason, because I think that's going to be something that they need to lean on, because as good as Isaac Okoro is defensively, you see like against the best defenses in the league, the offensive impact isn't there. Like only 1 field goal attempt.
Yeah, that just can't happen, man. Like I know that, like I know there are people who hand wring about Okoro. Hi, David. And the less than full box score lines that he can post. And the counter would be, it's not like Thibault's shooting a ton, but Thibault had 6 steals. Thibault is filling up. I don't think it was a good game for Isaac. I just don't think, like, you can't play 32 minutes and get one field goal. It just can't happen. In a lot of ways, like Thibault and Okoro can be a little bit Spider-Man mean. Obviously, Thibault's a little bit older, but like the reason Thibault works is because there's other guys that can create. There's other guys that can shoot around him, and Isaac has worked really well this season when that's the case for him. But when you're dealing with injuries, when you don't have a backup point guard, when you don't have Lowry out there spacing the floor, it just gets a lot more difficult. Yeah, it's all the things to couch it are there, and I get it, but 1-for-1 is just tough. It's just tough, man. They're not guarding you, and the team is too good defensive. The defensive personnel the Sixers had on the floor is too good to be that invisible. And my guess is Isaac knows that. My guess is that the coaching staff is like, buddy, we don't even care if you make it. You got to shoot. Like you're wide open in the corner. You got to take it at least a couple times to keep him honest. And I think he will. It's just been one of those up and down seasons for Isaac, man. Like I feel like in a way this season has almost been more up and down than his rookie year in terms of, and I think it's primarily just because the team is better. Like it matters more when he has a game where he's kind of invisible,
and teams are getting up for them in ways that they didn't last season, right? And we've talked about the changes defensively of what's being allowed in the NBA, and now you have full crowds out there instead of empty gyms. Like all of that kind of stuff has had a league-wide impact, and I think it's just more amplified for someone like Okoro, who still needs to work on his ball handling, still needs to work on the jump shot, even though it has been better at spots. Like there are still big gaps in his offensive game that limit his effectiveness against the best teams in the league, which I think is perfectly understandable, but it's worthwhile to point out.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at guys on this Cavs roster who might get schemed out of a playoff series, because it happens every year. It happens to great players. Channing Frye, one of the now friend of the pod, and yes. And one of the best stretch bigs in NBA history got schemed out of the series against the Warriors. So it happens to good players that have flaws. And right now, Isaac is the kind of guy who, depending on who they play in the first round, you might just see, well, we just can't play Isaac more than 15 minutes today. And we're going to have to play Karras. We're going to have to play Karras and Lowry huge minutes, and I think it is worth noting, though I'm not exactly panicking, again, a couple months older than Evan, and I won't hold Evan to that standard that he can't, he can't have a couple fatal flaws. So,
right. And this is a situation that he's been thrust into because of injuries, right? Yeah. Like when you lose Sexton and Rubio, it changes what that backcourt rotation is going to look like. So I still would like to see more progression after the All-Star break, once the team's a little bit fresher and whatnot, like it's going to be a different environment for him. So I think any progress he can make between now and the postseason is going to make a big difference. Carter, before we wrap this up, do you want to talk a little bit about All-Star expectations?
Yeah, let us do so. First off, I'm very excited. Guys, All-Stars in Cleveland. It's next week. This week.
I'm very excited, man. I'm going to be more excited after I get my negative PCR test back, and I know for sure I'm flying. But, man, I can't wait to get back down to Cleveland. I'm incredibly excited that the 1-year anniversary of our partnership with the Cavs is going to be when we're both in Cleveland on Friday. That's going to be a lot of fun. And, man, the skills competition, I don't know about this format. It's a little bit weird. Cavs versus the Antetokounmpo brothers and rookies. But at the same time, Garland, Mobley, and Allen. I mean, it's been pretty reliable for us this season. I'm feeling pretty good about their chances.
We're here for it all, brother. We got the celebrity game with Myles Garrett, who's going to look like an absolutely ridiculous on a basketball court.
Let me tell you, if I walked into a gym and I saw that man, I'd turn around. Like there's no way. There's like even Kevin Love would not want to take a charge from Myles Garrett.
No,
and he took one from Embiid.
No. So I'm excited for all of it. Attending as a quote unquote media member. I guess that's what we are now. I'm excited to ideally do a couple live pods if we can. You're getting into town Wednesday as we cross our fingers and knock on wood. I'm getting into town Friday. It's going to be so much fun, and I'm sure if you are, if I'm sure we'll try to do some kind of get together at some bar, with friends of the pod and listeners of the pod if we can make the time. So we'll obviously be tweeting that out. But I do want to just ask, like, what are you expecting from Darius in the All-Star game? Closing lineup?
Well,
could he? Could he?
That's a very, very good question. Let me pull up the All-Star teams here, because I do think we need to mention, like, LeBron picking Garland was really, really funny.
Hilarious.
He and KD fighting over the right to trade for Garland and calling Garland untouchable. That is once again fever dream stuff for me. I mean, I could definitely see Garland closing out here. I mean, you got Trae Young out there. You obviously don't want him if you need a stop down the stretch. A little bit more of an honest basketball player in Darius Garland.
I think it's Trae. I think it is all dependent on, like, does Darius go off at some point in the game with a couple crazy buckets or a couple crazy passes? And just Trae will by default be the closer. But if Trae's like maybe not playing so good and Darius has a couple moments, I'll bet he closes.
I read it totally wrong. Or did I? No, Trae's on Team Durant.
Oh,
this is a very awful format.
Ja is on. Is Ja on Team LeBron? I don't remember.
They got Steph out there, which, I mean, if you have a lead, you probably don't want him out there. Well, actually, you do. He plays really well with the lead. It's coming from behind. That's a little bit tricky.
He might get DeVleet. He might get DeMars. I mean, the starters will. That's a good starting lineup, man. DeRozan's probably the only one he's getting off the floor.
Yeah, that's probably true.
This is tough. I don't think he's closing. Damn.
I don't think he's closing. That's fine. But I think the minutes that he is going to be out there, like, he's got a game that's so well suited for All-Star. We'll see. Maybe with Zach LaVine now getting some tests for soreness that he's dealing with. Maybe he doesn't play, and that opens up a spot for Jared Allen. The James Harden hamstring thing seems to be a thing as well. We don't know if that's just kind of, maybe it's a situation where he just had to sit out a game to act like it was a real thing, and my concerns about his health are all for nothing. Then he was just faking to get out of Brooklyn. So we'll see what the situation is there. But I do think when Garland is out there,
you never root for injuries. But if anyone else can't make it, oh darn! If Jared gets a late invite, come on, he already lives here.
If Jared doesn't get the invite, the
other target would be Pascal, right? At this point.
Yeah, probably, because now he has played a much larger sample of games. Like he's stayed healthy.
Killing it.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal. So I think I'd be more okay with that. That's different than LaMelo Ball getting in for Instagram engagement and whatnot. But you can't win them all, Carter.
No, you can't. Disrespect.
Well, we will. His recording schedule is going to be a little bit weird with us in town for Cleveland. I think we'll get a podcast up later in the week. Carter, Super Bowl prediction. Who do you got?
I think Joey Buckets is a man of destiny. I think the Bengals are taking this one.
I would like to see that. I'm going to pick the Rams just because I think that Bengals offensive line might cause Joey to get murdered, but you never know.
He's been getting murdered the last month, and he's just fine.
That's true. You can't discount big game Joey. So we'll see what happens there. That's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, we will have another podcast probably uploaded at some point this week, and then a recap the following week. Excited to see what the post All-Star break stretch means for the Cleveland Cavaliers. A lot of really important games. Thank you so much to everyone that's tuning in live on YouTube. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast, make sure you leave a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chasetown's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of that review to chasetownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.